in this video, we're going to take a look at another sampling distribution, an example where we're going to find the sampling distribution dealing with the proportion of something. So we're going to look at the proportion of odd numbers. We are again going to think about rolling a single three-sided die 3 different times. Again, if it's a three-sided die, we're really thinking about maybe something like a 6-sided die that just has the numbers 1, 2, 3 on it. There are some fancy 3-sided die out there. You can do a Google search, and there's some pretty snazzy ways that people create 3-sided dies. But here, we're thinking about what proportion of the 3 rolls, what proportion of the time do we get an odd number. So here, we get an odd number 3 out of the 3 rolls, so 100% of the time. On the next one, we get an odd number 2 out of the 3 times, and then 3 out of 3, and then 2 out of 3, and then 1 out of 3, and then 2 out of 3, and then 3 out of 3. 2 out of 3. 3 out of the 3 times. 2 out of 3. 1 out of the 3. I know this is riveting stuff. 2 out of 3. 1 out of the 3 rolls here is odd. Ooh, and then we get something interesting happening. 0 out of the 3 rolls is odd. So 0. And then again, we have 1 out of the 3 rolls. 2 out of 3. 1 out of 3. 2 out of 3. 3 out of 3 are 100%. 2 out of 3. 3 out of 3. 2 out of 3. 1 out of 3. 2 out of 3. 3 out of 3. 2 out of 3. And finally, again, 3 out of 3. All right. So there we have identified all of the proportions that show up. We have not yet identified what the distribution is, that sampling distribution for the proportions. So we will now go through and we will describe each of the proportions that we could have gotten or that showed up. So we got a proportion of 0, a proportion of 1/3 of the rolls, 2/3, and 3/3 are just 1. And how many times do each of those proportions show up? So I'll call that p hat. This is strange, like the probability of p hat. So the probability of a proportion of 0, that showed up exactly 1 time out of the 27 different die rolls. That proportion of 1/3, that showed up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times out of 27, or 2/9. 2/3, that showed up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times out of 27, which would be maybe like 3, 4/9. And that mean of 1, it showed up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times out of the 27. So that is a sampling distribution for the proportion. So that's a little bit different than the mean. I would just want you guys to be aware that we can talk about sampling distributions for any type of statistic that you would want to talk about. So we could talk about proportions, we could talk about variances. So we could have gone through and calculated the variance for each one of those 3 die rules, and then we could describe how are the variances distributed, all of those sample variances. That would be a lot of work, but we could have done it. In the next video, we're going to take a look at biased and unbiased estimators. We will see you there.